And I think the key to sustainability during the pandemic for independent companies was how can we reinvent our product where we can present it in a way that will allow us to be sustainable still. And you saw some indies were able to do that well, and others were not. One thing that we have the benefit of now in today's independent scene are streaming platforms like independent wrestling television, IWTV, or Fight TV, where promotions could tape closed set shows and then stream them for an audience that an audience could pay money for, pay a subscription service fee for, sponsor wrestlers, sponsor the shows. And that allowed the promotion to sustain not just their storylines, but to also continue to put shows on and not fold. And that was huge. That was just how we have in our daily lives reinvented with the emergence of Zoom and WebEx and all that stuff. Independent promotions have done similar things. Now, some independent promotions during the pandemic were like, nah, we're going to run anyway with 10 fans and we'll distance them out throughout the entire arena. And I think most found that that was not a very sustainable way of running, especially when there was a lack of testing availability and you had talent getting very sick on these shows. I thought that was a really irresponsible way to run shows. I think the true test was for the smart promotions where how can we remain relevant? How can we reinvent? And a lot of it came down to doing closed set tapings and streaming. And that was a huge way for a lot of these promotions to remain floating through this pandemic.
I was gonna say because I've talked to two promoters so far. Do you know any Northeast Wrestling and with Mike Lombardi? I was able to talk with him for a bit, and he said they probably experienced somewhere from 80 to 90% revenue loss, which is just I'm sure that's not
Yeah.
nothing new for unfortunately some. And then Northeast Championship Wrestling, which is NCW.
Yep. Yep. Mhm.
And so he obviously didn't have as many figures because they're more of a mom and pop show than Northeast Wrestling. But even he was, and just mentioning things like the ring rust some of the wrestlers he was working with had just from the layoff and not being able to find training.
Yeah, and I mean, I can tell you Limitless because that's definitely one of the promotions I work closest with. They expanded their audience in the pandemic because of how they reinvented, and now that shows are back up and running, there's more of a demand that they've ever had. So it's really about how smart were you in presenting your product during this and utilizing your talent in a way that doesn't pigeonhole you when you're trying to do things on a much smaller scale. And I think some promotions were able to do that and others really weren't.